Welcome to this morning's meeting of the Westerville City Schools Board of Education. We're delighted to have all of you this morning, and thank you for your flexibility to make this work. We really appreciate it. There will be two opportunities this morning to address the board. The first being Agenda Item 6.1. The first set of public comments is relative to Agenda Items 7.1 through 11.1. Please state the agenda items you are referencing at the beginning of your comments. The second opportunity is Agenda Item 12.1. There's a sign-up sheet located on the table at the back of the room, and each speaker will have 5 minutes to address the board, and a timer will be shown on the screen. And with that, Ms. Marshall, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Bell?
Here.
Mrs. Ottman?
Here.
Dr. Nestor-Baker?
Here.
Mrs. Meyer is absent. Mrs. Davidson?
Here. Will you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we do not have any highlights or recognition this morning. We do not have any reports. That takes us to 5.1. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the Board of Education meeting held on Monday, May 22nd, 2023, as presented?
So moved. Second.
Any questions or comments here? Hearing none?
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor-Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Ottman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. 5.2, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the Board of Education meeting held on Tuesday, June 6, 2023, as presented?
So moved.
Second. Any questions or comments here? Hearing none?
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Ottman?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor-Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. We do not have any board comments this morning, which takes us to financials. 7.1, resolution to approve the purchases in accordance to ORC 5705.41 and board policy 6320. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
And Ms. Marshall, would you like to talk to us about this?
Yes, thank you, President Davidson, members of the board. So we're at that time of year. We're coming up on the end of the fiscal year. And so we have a lot of purchase orders, old purchase orders that have been closed out and new ones that need to be opened. And so that's the case with our purchases that are being approved out of the 004 fund this month. And then for the registration gateway premium with EMS Link, that was a case of us changing billing cycles. And with crossing over the fiscal year, we had a then and now purchase order that came from that. For the Ever-Driven Technologies, that was, we didn't have enough in a purchase order. We do have it budgeted, but we didn't have the purchase order opened high enough to cover the total cost.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none?
Mrs. Ottman?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor-Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. That takes us to the personnel consent agenda. I'd like to welcome Mark Cooper. We're going to take this as 2 readings, so we'll let you start. May I have a motion, please, for 8.1 through 8.7, and then 8.9 through 8.12.
So moved.
Second.
Welcome.
President Davidson, members of the board, Ms. Marshall, and Dr. Miller. Number 10.
So silly.
Items in this morning's personnel consent agenda include action with regard to resignations, retirements, leaves of absence, contract status changes, one-time pays, and employment decisions. Additionally, we are seeking your approval to extend an MOA with WESA regarding substitute custodial support over the summertime. So it's a current MOA in place, and this is extending it through the summer. I also want to note 2 retirements on the agenda. The first for George Carey after 16 years of service to the district. Also, Carolyn Robinson is retiring after 21 years of service to the district. We appreciate their dedication to our students and staff and wish them well in their years of retirement ahead. At this time, I can take any questions you may have.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none?
Thank you.
Mrs. Ottman?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor-Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. May I have a motion for 8.08, reemployment, for the personnel consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments here? Hearing none?
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Abstain.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. Moving on to old business. I'm going to go ahead and take this as one. 9.1 through 9.11. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments here? Hearing none?
Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Altman,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes. Moving on to new business, 10.1, first reading for policy 5610, removal, suspension, expulsion, and permanent exclusion of students. May I have a motion? Nope, I don't need one, sorry. I'd just like to welcome Mr. McElwain.
Good morning. Thank you, President Davidson, Dr. Kellogg.
We good? Okay. Thank you, President Davidson, Dr. Kellogg, Ms. Marshall, members of the Board of Education. It is my pleasure to present to you the first reading of revisions to Board Policy 5610, dealing with removal, suspension, expulsion, and permanent exclusion of students. This policy is recommended for language revisions due to changes in Ohio Revised Code and recommendations from Neola. Most of the revisions within this policy are pretty just simple wording changes. There are a few key pieces that are dealing with retention of documents, work missed while out on suspension, and then also some pieces with alternative consequence lists. The recommended revisions with this policy is to reflect Ohio current law and to make sure that we maintain accurate policies. If there are any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer those at this time.
I have one. We have added language about preponderance of evidence. So we are saying, in determining whether a student is to be suspended or expelled, district administrators shall use a preponderance of evidence standard. Is that language our choice, law, or Neola's suggestion? And the reason I'm asking is preponderance of evidence. I totally understand why we would want to use that language, but I also know that it can be, how to put this? It can, without a very strong system of evidence gathering, it can sometimes result in students being accused of things that the actual evidence may not support.
A lot of it is recommendations with that piece, but a lot of it is what administrators kind of do day in and day out is with their fact gathering and what the facts look at. So they look at that majority of what the facts are leading them to. Yeah.
And I know we have a very strong approach to investigating. And I always worry about preponderance of evidence because it can lead, particularly when there are cases of bias involved, it can lead to individuals being punished for something that appears to have happened, but bias got in the way of what happened. So anyway, as long as we've got that backup for our investigative procedures, I'm comfortable with it. I just wondered if it was our choice of language or someone else's.
Just the recommendation, yeah. And honestly, what the schools use a lot of the times. You know, a lot of times people think that the schools are more of, you know, court, and they're not. So that whole, you know, they watch the shows and they think about, you know, beyond a reasonable doubt. That's not what a
DNA.
school is. Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And my only comment is, as we move forward into the summer, I'm okay with this policy as it stands. I'm not sure these forms of, I'll call them punishment, really are beneficial to kids. So I would like to look at that moving forward.
Absolutely.
Anybody else?
I just have a quick question about, you know, document retention and so on. So will this change any of our processes, like in terms of document retention, information retention?
We keep these documents already. It's just making sure that we're just kind of officially
That it's
out
in the
there.
policy and
Yeah.
stuff?
Mhm.
It's not a, that's what I want to ask and make clear. It's not a change in our practice. It's just putting it in the policy.
Yep, exactly.
Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Excellent, thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
10.2, first reading for policy 9700.01, advertising and commercial activities. And welcome, Mr. Vibrance.
Good morning, President Davidson, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, Ms. Marshall. Before you for consideration is an update to policy 9700.01, advertising and commercial activities. These are really just a few housekeeping updates, nothing significant. The language added will now establish the general advertising guidelines are now applicable to advertising on district website, should the district ever choose to go down that route, or if we contract with a third party for such services. There's also language that has been added to confirm that advertising will not be permitted on the inside or outside of school buses. That has really been state law. It's now just added to the policy. And an interesting point about that one is the recommended language simply stopped there, that we were not going to allow advertising on the inside or outside of school buses. We added clarifying language to state that it will not have advertising when they're being used to transport students to or from school or while being used for extracurricular or co-curricular activities, because we do have buses that are sometimes parked with advertising on the side for new hires, and technically we would have been out of compliance with our own policy if we didn't add that clarification. So. And then the final aspect to this is we add some language that grants final discretion to the board regarding advertising, whether to advertise, if the content, the value of the materials being advertised. So in other words, this is just a layer for appeals if there's a decision at the board level, or I'm sorry, at the district level that then can be appealed to the board level. And that's it.
Okay, great. Any questions or comments? Hearing none. Thank you so much. Recommended action and standing business, 11.1. Ohio Health Agreement. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
And welcome, Ms.
All right.
Baldwin.
Good morning, President Davidson, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, Ms. Marshall. I'm excited to bring forward this Ohio Health Partnership Agreement for your consideration this morning. Ohio Health is a great partner with our district, and in this agreement, it lays out a sponsorship opportunity that they support our athletic departments. They also provide training, including CPR training, to our coaches at no cost that help them get their pupil activities permit, and they also provide us space for meetings as well as provide a space for our enrollment center. So this is part of that agreement. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I don't have a question, but just a comment. I am so grateful and thankful for this partnership. So thank you.
Me too. They're a great team.
Anybody else?
Just a comment. I've said this before. I'm going to say it again. I appreciate the partnership with Ohio Health, and you're right, they're a great team. And I appreciate Mark Hirschheiser's foresight many years ago in working to create the initial partnerships.
I appreciate that too.
Dr. Nestabaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. We do not have any public comments. That takes us to board comments. Would anyone like to make a comment this morning?
This is our first meeting following the graduation festivities a few weeks ago, so congratulations to all of the graduates. Hope they are enjoying life post K-12 education, and congratulations to those families. Thank you so much to all of the staff that made graduation Saturday possible. I know that was a heavy lift and a lot of work, so thank you all so much for all of your efforts to make that a successful day for our young people and for families. And thank you to all of the attendees and for all of their kind and gracious words that they have shared with me and with us since then. Congratulations to our 2 retirees that are retiring, that are on this morning's agenda. And thanks to all of the staff once again for a great school year. Now we have a chance to hopefully take a deep breath and get ready for the next one that's right around the corner.
think that's it for board comments this morning. 14.1, the board will meet in regular session on Monday, June 26th at 6 PM here at the Early Learning Center. And with that, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes. We're adjourned.